Welcome to the C-Suite Marketing Perspectives podcast. I'm Steve McDonald, your host. And today we've got an incredible conversation, an incredible guest. We're going to be talking about the true role of demand gen, how you create it, and how far it extends, and what you should be focusing on. And as our guest here today, we have Hunter Montgomery. And Hunter, you're the current CMO of Churn Zero. You're a two-time CMO. You've got 25 years of B2B marketing experience under your belt, all kinds of global sales and marketing strategies that you've implemented. So hearing your point of view about demand generation, how it starts, right? How far it gets carried through, all the way through it. I think you're going to talk a lot today about customer marketing and the impact of revenue on the company and how important that is. But before we launch into all of that, why don't you explain maybe a little bit more about your background and what you're doing right now at Churn Zero?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Steve. Pleasure to be here. But yeah, as you said, 25 years and kind of B2B marketing SaaS by the last 15 years. She did this stint way back in the early 2000s when it was ASP, application service provider, pre SaaS. Um, so yeah, I think it's been an interesting last 20, 23 years in terms of marketing and kind of what you focus on. A lot of things that were are old or new again. I think the whole idea of content and thought leadership and that kind of marketing has always been with us forever. It just sort of gets reprioritized or repackaged or repositioned. But ultimately it still is the key to any good market organization. That's job is to drive sales, drive revenue like a B2B SaaS company is versus maybe more of a, sometimes just a brand organization or, somewhere you don't have that direct line from creating an opportunity to having a deal close.
Well, since you kind of opened it up there and talked about, lots of people talk, on content is the fuel that ignites the entire demand gen process, right? And so maybe talk a little bit about if you're thinking about content in general, right? That there's a lot that goes into that bucket. But there's thought leadership content, there's product marketing content, there's customer marketing content. How do you see those areas and their different roles and the importance of each and how that plays into the demand gen cycle?
Yeah. So I think thought leadership is sort of, it's your base, it's your foundation. Um, you can't start on the demand gen side by simply doing search engine marketing and email blasts and try to get people to come and say, oh, I've never heard of this company, but it sounds like I need to see their product, right? You need to establish who you are as a brand, who you are in the industry, because people, a lot of cases, are doing searches and looking for solutions, and they simply aren't looking for a single tool. They may be looking for somebody who actually has validated that their process or their tool or their company is an expert in it. And so that's really where that whole idea of the thought leadership, and it's not, it can be very broad thought leadership, right? You can have thought leadership at your executive level. Like you want your founder, your CEO to come across as being someone because they founded the company based it on, not because they wanted to make a lot of money, but because they had a problem and then they found a problem and they have a solution for it. So you start at that level down to just kind of your entire organization from even the people we do a lot of work with our customer success managers because they're the experts from our product. They use our product. They have customers that they interact with. So making them the expert too validates and brings in kind of a level of thought leadership that the everyday user wants to understand and say, oh, that person does my job and that person understands my issues. So I should listen to that person. And if not because they're selling a product, they are selling a process. They are talking about issues that they see every day. So, that whole idea of building that foundation from your CEO all the way down to your frontline folks on showing that they know the issue, the problems, and they have solutions. And maybe not all the time, and maybe not the perfect ones, but kind of bring that authenticity to your content because that's what you want when people first interact with your content.
Yeah, that's what, all the studies in the industry talks about is trusted advisors, right? That we have to have this role of that we're not just experts at our tech, right? But we're experts at what's going on in the industry. What are the problems? What are the trends? What are the unique insights and solutions that are happening? What's being tried now? Like there's a whole world there, right? And it's typically hard for any one company to really have a lock on that, right? And really represent that. And that's why I think you and I, when we were right before we pressed the record button, we were talking about the stat that 70% of thought or B2B buyers think that the thought leadership that they read doesn't provide any value to them. So here we are, we know content, it gets us, into conversations earlier in the purchase process, the buyer's process here. Yet, as an industry, we're not really good at creating thought leadership. Now, what's your take on that? Like, you obviously do a lot to produce very high quality thought leadership. But one of the things that we want to do here is we got to, you know, peers of yours, CMOs throughout the community, people that are running marketing in their companies here, they're thinking this is a tough task, right? This isn't an easy thing to do. What would your advice be for them?
So I think there's two routes to go, and you should do them both, right? First, you find internal folks, and I know that we hired a new writer and had not been in industry, and we basically leaned on her to talk a lot with our chief customer officer, who was also our chief product officer, because she had the wealth of knowledge. And it would be, look, spend an hour a week just basically interviewing her, talk to her. And for the first, I don't know, 6 months, 9 months, a lot of the content that she wrote, we would send over to our CCO and our CPO and say, are we close? Are we doing well? Or we go to our customer success managers who are doing this every day. Are we close? Are we doing it well? And then they would give us feedback, but she had to learn the industry. And it wasn't learning by reading outside. It was learning by talking to people inside. Now she'd also do her own research. So you have to get your own team up to speed. So your product team, your customer team says, okay, what they're publishing is right. It is correct. They are talking about it. And it's hard, right? It's not easy because you want to just kind of throw stuff out. And with ChatGPT now, right? You could say, give me a topic on this, give me a blog post on this. And you're not even sure it's going to be right. So you vetting that kind of content internally is important, and it's hard. And there are times when the CCO would say, I don't have time. Or I don't have time for you. I've got this, I've got that. Can you do it? You all need to catch up to me. And she'd get frustrated. I'm like, okay, we will catch up. We're caught up now. A couple of years in, we have two great writers who are experts. They can create their own ebooks. They still work with the product team and the CS team, but it's more as a validation than a source content. The other side of it is you go outside, like you find partners. There are lots of consultants, other thought leaders outside of your company who, in all honesty, want to get in front of your customers, right? Their jobs a lot of times are consulting and helping your customers. They want to get in front of your customers. And so given the opportunity to create content, because then you can say, well, look, this is not us talking about this topic. This is, consultancy ABC, and they're a known expert and you've seen them and they're on LinkedIn and they produce a lot of content. We even took it one step further. We did a study, right? Studies are pretty common. Marketers can do that, right? So this is our fourth annual leadership study for our industry. And we had 1,200 people reply to the survey last year, which is pretty amazing. And we locked in some good partners with it. We locked in HubSpot and SaaStr. It's a big SaaS organization who wanted to be a partners with it because they saw this is really good thought leadership. It's not us talking. It's not even them talking. It's the industry talking, right? So, can you build on that? When we started 4 years ago, we thought, oh, this will be pretty good. And I think we got 600 responses, and that's a great response rate in terms of a survey. But 4 years later, when you have HubSpot say we want to be part of this content, that goes a long way to help validate that you said for the authenticity of the content you're building out.
I mean, what you have said all along there is really important. One of the things you just said at the end is that validation, right? And going outside of the company is so important because bottom line, company is the seller, right? So we eat our own dog food, right? We're
Yeah.
expected to, you know, make recommendations. And when we do make recommendations and they're important, and they're insightful, it goes up to here. But then when we can get validation from outside peers and industry experts, luminaries, all of a sudden it goes up to here, right? Because now we're speaking with the voice of the industry in our recommendations, right? So yeah, having a SaaStr or a HubSpot is just two great examples of that validation. But tell me a little bit because we need to, there's, 95 to 97% of our audience isn't in the market for what we're selling at any one point in time. And so what that means is that we have to constantly be in front of them, not with product marketing, right? Not customer marketing. These are our prospects. We need to be in front of them with thought leadership,
Yes.
right? What that means is this is a every week, every month, every year, constant cycle that we need to be producing good content and good thought leadership content. And so that's where this kind of, balance of quantity versus quality comes in. And how do you think about that in kind of staying in front of your ICP on, ICPs on a regular basis?
Right. Right. So I'm big on quality over quantity. I think I know about 10 years ago, the last company I was at, the CEO and I went to a HubSpot. They had a half day for customers come in, and it was 20 people. They talked about things, and their blog. They're inbound. They're famous for their blog posts, and
Right.
they were doing 2 or 3 a day, and they are hiring. That point they were trying to hire journalists because they were all the journalists were getting laid off. And my CEO turned to me and said, "We need that. We need to go hire a journalist. They'll figure out our industry, and we need to, you know, produce blog posts every day, every other, just let's get content, content, content." And that was because that was a HubSpot model, which of course everyone really knew that HubSpot had a very, very large outbound sales team that made calls. But the story was it was all inbound. Um, and, we hired a writer, and then we acquired a company, and they had a really, really popular blog, and it got to more than ours. They were a much smaller company than us. They were a competitor. And, and the CEO said, "Hey, let's look at their blog. They get a lot of traffic." And then we looked at the people that came in who wanted to talk about the product or take a demo or do something like that. There are no qualified leads. I mean, it was great content, but it didn't bring anybody in. And so maybe it wasn't great content, right? That's the whole thing.
Right.
You've got to match what is great content. I mean, it has to be useful and helpful and get eyeballs and consumption, but it has to lead to them wanting to talk to you more and talk about your product, right? So don't have to mention your product, any part of your thought leadership content, but at some point they want to say, "Gee, okay, I just read this piece. That's a problem I have. Someone can help me solve it. It's this company. I mean, at least talk to them. Let me go talk to the salesperson or something like that." But if you don't get that last part, all that activity means nothing. So that's where it's the quality, right? You got to hit the right pain points at the right stage, and it can't be dated or it can't be too thin, right? Everybody wants to do the top 10 this, top 10 that, which are great. Like they get great SEO, they can be helpful. But if that's all the content you do, you're just sort of, an inch deep and a mile wide, and you're not getting the engagement that you want or the trust or authenticity that you want to get with your audience, be it customers or prospects or people just kind of kicking tires.
Yeah. At that blog, an example, that content can be driving a lot of traffic, but if it's not even, and it could be even high quality, but if that traffic isn't the traffic you want, right? Or if it isn't the traffic that's converting, right? Then like you're saying, you're spending a lot of time and a lot of effort, right? So that's a good way to kind of segue into, okay, this is all about demand gen, the right demand gen, right? So how do you take this through? In fact, you were just talking about customer marketing, right? And customer marketing is not only just targeted towards customers, but it represents the customer too. It represents the peer community of the prospects that you're reaching out to. Tell me a little bit about your customer marketing. How do you think about it, the role, what your focus is, maybe what you're doing at Churn Zero right now
Mhm.
that might be helpful to the rest of us?
Yeah. So when I first started at Trend Zero, it's been about 4 years. Um, we're a customer success platform, full disclosure, and our CS organization because of the platform, had a very efficient way to communicate with our customers. So I sort of laid off. I said, "Hey, you guys have it. It's great. It's working well." We did a newsletter to kind of give them the air cover, but they had the conversation. They knew when customers weren't doing well or what they were doing or not doing in features. And so it was the CS team that did a lot of the discussion. And about a year ago, our CCO and I were talking like we need to have a different conversation with customers that, has trackable outcomes. So what we did is we hired one of our CSMs, one of our best CSMs. She wanted to move into marketing. She came over. We gave her customer marketing as a role. And we started kind of treating her like we do with our demand gen team. Like you need to produce, we want to produce content. And also, as you mentioned earlier, almost all of our content could be consumed by customers. Like we didn't say this is prospect content and oh, let's create some customer content. Like when we talk about how to best do a QBR or how to engage with your customers who are not using your product, like all that content could be consumed by customers or prospects. So we kind of had that content side covered. But now we need to figure out how do we engage those customers because you want them to do things. You want them to renew, right? So you want them to adopt your product. And the CS team does a lot of things, but there's things that the marketing team can do to help them with features, the importance and the impact of these features. And then you also want to look for opportunities for, upselling. If that's going to be an additional product or moving from one version of your platform to another one. And so we started to build campaigns that have very similar trigger points to demand gen. They're going to convert. They're going to ask to talk to somebody. Now it's not the same. They're not filling out a demo form and saying, I want to see a demo. They're saying, hey, CSM, I'd love to learn more about this product. And so we were able to kind of try to track that. And I think this last quarter, the CCO put a number on this customer marketing for upsell, like just to influence, like, well, we're going to take baby steps. We just want to say we did these things and customers engage with our content and then bought that product, upsold that product. And she set a goal and we doubled it. Now we didn't know we had to just pick a number. So we picked a number, but just being able to track that and see that was impactful. Um, because, we're talking about the whole idea of content marketing. This is not collateral sheets. This is not, it's not features and functionality. You're trying to convince the customers that what they're going to do, if they're going to upsell or renew, is going to have an impact on them. And so it's very similar to the beginning when you have a prospect that comes in, it's like, I'm not quite sure about this company, but wow, they've got really good content. So I think I kind of started to trust them. And now they're customers, same thing. Hey, I've been getting some communications from the customer, from this other organization within the company. I think I believe, what they're saying makes sense. So I'm going to ask more questions. I want to learn more. It's not hey, if you buy before the end of the month, you'll get 20% discount. So buy, right? That's not what customer marketing should ever be. And that's not, or even customer success should ever be. So that's kind of where we've been doing I think it's kind of where I think we're ahead. I think there's a huge opportunity for marketing art departments who want to own customer marketing because there's a lot of data out there on customers and there's a lot of things you can do to gain their trust and push them along the way.
Well, Hunter, I mean, you and I have been around for a number of decades. And so we always heard, right, that, you know, it's much easier to increase revenue from existing customers than conquest new customers, right? So, and, I had a CEO on a few months back, and he was talking about the studies that they had done at the company he was at and how much balance there needed to be. If the goal is revenue generation, then we shouldn't just be thinking about new logos, right? A significant portion of increased revenues needs to be coming from our existing customer base. And so that's what you're talking about here. And I love thinking about it in the same way at the top of the demand gen funnel with prospects. I was like, you're feeding them not product feature, you're feeding them content that makes them think, hey, that's a good idea. I should explore this some more. And you're doing that with your customers as well. And you picked a number and you said you doubled it. I'm sure you didn't pick a number that was like so easy. Everybody's like, yeah, we're going to make this no big deal. Right.
Right.
So Tell me a little bit more about this. And you were just recently, or your customer marketing person was just recently at a conference. What's the current thinking that's going on in terms of around customer marketing and what we should be knowing?
Yeah, yeah. I think so. There's one thing that came out. I had a conversation with some other marketing executives recently too, and that is I don't know how much customer success teams trust marketing yet, right? Because to them, marketing is kind of creating the collateral and the lack of a better term, fluff, which they don't understand content marketing like we do. So it's gaining that trust that we can get in front of the customers. Like it's back to trust, right? That we can get in front of customers, give them valuable content, give them information that helps them do their job better, which helps the CS team manage their customers better, right? So there's a little bit of that trust, and then the idea of um, even giving from there, letting us then communicate. We use our own platform, right? So it's a CSP. You can use HubSpot, you can use other ones. As long as you have that data about your customers, you can then have those interactions, have those. It's not a blast. It's a more of a, yeah, it's like our demand gen. They're personas. You have use cases, you have needs, right? And so you talk to your prospect based on that. You same thing, you talk to your customers based on that. But she was at this conference and a lot of people came up to her and said, I can't believe that your CS team lets you talk to the customers. I can't believe you have access to that. I don't even have access to our CSP because the CS team won't let me. Um, so I think that's the first hurdle. Like you have to get the CS team to say, okay, we will talk to customers about this. We kind of got the day-to-day interaction. You all can kind of come on top with information, content, right? The trusted advisor, the thought leadership content. Don't send them promotions. Don't send them just sort of fluffy marketing stuff. Talk to them like you're a CS person, except you have some additional information for them. So, I mean, I think that's the first one is getting people to understand that the whole idea of treating it like a demand gen team. I think you're even two steps past that, but I think it's there, and I think because of the data that we have on customers. I mean, demand gen marketers, we love to know, what's your title and what's your job and what's your industry and what have you done on our website? That's great. On customer side, you know what product they use, what product they don't use, what feature they use, what feature they don't use, where the renewal is. Are they the primary owner? Are they the end user? So that amount of information makes it so much more targeted in our content and in our discussions.
You know what's kind of a little crazy about this, right? So, like Gardner even wrote recently about how CMOs should be more like, chief customer officers, right? And we all know the highest voice of authority in a company is the customer, right? So, representing as CMOs, we should be representing the customer, right? We should at the strategy table from the highest levels down, we should be there helping to represent the customer. So the idea that customer success and marketing and there's a little bit of distrust that's happening there, that silo has to be broken, right?
Yeah.
And I was talking to another gentleman, and he's a three-time B2B CMO, SaaS CMO, and he was like, Steve, I have to tell you, I feel a little bit untethered from the customer right now. I haven't had a conversation with a customer in the last 3 weeks. And he says, but our team, we're always in front of the customer. We always have to be in front of the customer. And so that alignment is so important. But we're also supposed to be data driven. And I love it. We've got this whole other data chest, right? Of how they're using the product, right? And that tells us so much more about, upsell and cross sell is like, look, they're not even using this whole portion of what we're doing, right? Or what we
Yeah.
have. They don't even know about it, maybe.
Right.
It's such a fertile area. Um, so, I mean, what I want to do is I want to talk a little bit about, do the metrics change, the tracking, where in terms of being data driven, it's really thought leadership for customers, right? But do you track it differently? Do you report differently? How do you think about that?
You know, at the very top, we try to report the same way. And that is, have we done things that are driving new revenue, new booking, right? So How we get there is different on the customer side because, as I mentioned before, it's a subtle engagement. Like we have, let's just say we have XYZ product we're trying to upsell. We put an in-app message to customers that don't have it. Learn more, click on this. Like that click is one indication that they were interested, right? But it's just a click. In the demand gen side, that would be a visit to the website or maybe download an ebook, right? Um,
Like an
then,
MQL, right? Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and so a lot of that is we have to sort of do it's sort of the influenced tracking, right, on the demand gen side. Well, they consume these things, but we don't have that direct line from filled out a form, close the deal, right? Like we can say that, okay, that generated that. It's now influence. What do they do? If these people all interacted with the content that said, learn more about this feature, and then they bought that feature, we're going to say, you know what? I think we had an impact on that. And like I said, it's version 1.0 of tracking this. It's sort of like probably where we were 15 years ago on the demand gen side. Um, but again, the ultimate goal, the ultimate metric is bookings. Did they do that? And even the CCO, she's like, I'm fine with this influence because we can start building up what are the benchmarks and can we get it tighter? Can we give a little bit more metrics that are a little tighter on that and not simply clicked on an in-app message or reply to an email? I mean, the biggest one is call me, right? Hey, I have this new feature. I'd love to explain how it can really help your XYZ. Send me a note. I'd love to have a call with you. And if you can track that to the CSM, right? Is to their CSM, that is almost like a demo request form in our world. But that's what we're trying to track and get that.
So just in terms of your thinking and strategy, as you know, we're all planning right now for 2024 and what we're going to be doing, the balance of traditional demand gen versus customer marketing, just in terms of the effort and the resources you're going to put towards it. How are you thinking about that?
I mean, it's still gonna the demand gen side is still gonna take most of the effort and time. I mean, we're a team of 11. We have one person on customer marketing. Now, she's probably worth two or three people in the amount of work she does and the expertise she brings. That's one advice I would give if anybody hires a customer marketing person, hire that from your CS team because they already have that connection, that validation that they know customers and the team and the product. And as I said before, a lot of the content can use on both sides. Like when we started a customer newsletter, 75% of the content was in our just general newsletter to everybody because the topics were the same. They related to everybody else. But so that's kind of where we see it. And the other thing is I think, you know, we are more efficient in our customer marketing, as I mentioned before, because we know so much more about our customers. Right? If we take the 25% that don't have this feature, I know exactly who they are and I know exactly what we want them to do. And I do campaigns and we see what's happened and we can come back and do it. Where, you know, our database, we know personas and we have revenue size and we want to get them the mid market, owner of whatever department. Um, and then you have a sales team that's doing it too, right? There's a lot of coordination between that and getting people inbound from content. Maybe they get a BDO or maybe they get a salesperson, maybe they're back into our team. So that is much more complex than what a sales organization, a customer organization could look like.
We've gone through quite a bit here, Hunter. And if if there was like a single takeaway that you wanted people to have from our conversation here, boil it down into a single takeaway, what would that be?
Just never get soft on metrics, right? Metrics and data that drives one, and you let you know if it's working or not. Um, it helps drive getting budget, right? From your CFO or CEO. It is, and it's probably the obvious statement, but it's really important. And even at the content level, right? Like we do lots of webinars. We do a lot of reports like that study. We do other events. We try to do different personas, and then we try to see volume is great, but if volume doesn't drive any sort of outcomes that you want in volume, like the blog that I mentioned earlier, right? You need to attach it to some sort of outcome. And we've had some funky ways. They did like an equation that did, you know, value per person, meaning, attach wins to a content piece and, you know, took it to the sales team. We have a new tool that tracks what they send out and what people reply to, and then do they become closed won deals. Like, so it's connecting all those little dots so what is resonating with the prospect and the customer, right? Do more of that, and what's not working, do less of that. Right? So metrics, you always got to dig into the data. It's there if you can just pull it all together.
Well, if there were additional questions that people had, would it be okay if we provided a link to your profile on LinkedIn?
Of course, happy to talk to anybody.
All right. Well, Hunter, thank you very much for coming on and sharing all these insights and just the focus on thought leadership and the focus on customer marketing. Uh, I think just re-emphasizing that has been tremendously insightful here. So thank you. Really
Thanks,
appreciate it.
Steve. Really appreciate. I enjoyed it. Thank you very much.